and welcome to another episode of the Anybrain's podcast. It is a pleasure to welcome you to another exciting episode about a pressing matter in the video games industry. In this particular one, we will focus our conversation on the topic of child protection in video games. With us, we have Laura Higgins, Senior Director of Community Safety and Civility at Roblox since January from 2019. Laura has over 20 years of experience in managing and promoting social care and support services, as well as creating online safety and digital civility programs. Apart from that, Laura is also part of the executive steering committee of the Fair Play Alliance, a global coalition of gaming professionals and companies that work together to develop and share best practices in encouraging wealthy communities and awesome player interactions in online gaming. Welcome, Laura. How are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you. So really grateful for you inviting me onto the show.
Oh, no, thank you for being here. With me also, as usual, is Anvu. Welcoming Anvu as well. How are you?
Hello, Laura. How are you doing?
Hi, it's really nice to be here with both of you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us.
Laura, I wanted to start by getting to know you a little bit about the Laura Gamer. What can you tell us about your very first video games that you played and how this passion for this industry developed in you?
I love this because some of us never grow up. So, although I did actually have a Commodore 64, but I really wasn't very good with it. But yeah, I'm Nintendo from the birth of Nintendo. I was a SNES girl. And I still am. I'm still, the Switch was just wonderful, but Nintendo 64 was my peak gaming time. And so throughout that, Mario's been a part of my life. I will love him forever. But also, Mario 64, I will still say is the best game that's ever been made. And I would fight for that. But yeah, I mean, just the evolution of it and just seeing what they've done, even with that 3D ability within Mario and what you can do on a handheld now is just mind-blowing for me. But yeah, things like GoldenEye on the 64 with the Rumble Pack and go for battles with my friends, that really says a lot about my teenage years, I think.
That game, GoldenEye, is amazing because it's old, I think, right? But it's always mentioned in this kind of historic gamers in the history of gamers past,
So I bought a Nintendo 64 a couple of years ago just so that I could play GoldenEye with my son. And he just went, oh, the graphics are so bad. And then he got really stuck just before a very important part of the story. And I was like, see, it's not that easy.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. But the truth is, you've worked in other industries prior to this one, right? Tell us a little bit more about your early career, since you have more than 20 years of experience in this field.
So I always talk about kind of wiggly line careers where I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, as they say. But one thing that always was with me is I was a bit of a do-gooder. I wanted to help people and do good in the world. So my earlier career was very much in real world safeguarding. So I worked, for example, with homeless people and I was a probation officer. And a lot of my focus was about helping people to turn their lives around. I got into child protection through that work. And so I was a committee member for BBC Children in Need, which is one of our biggest grant-making organisations. And that was happening at about the same time, really, that World Wide Web. And we were able to go online and, chat rooms were getting really popular and things like that. And somehow the two for me were really connected. So I was there to review applications for funding for places like women's refuges or, children's homes. And I was sort of thinking, right, they've got this one computer that's shared between all the people in the house. Do they have policies? Have they had training? Who's thinking about filtering? And all these things were kind of buzzing in my head because I was quite interested in it myself. And so that led to a genuine interest and really sort of looking at where the world was going with that. And whilst online safety was starting to be a conversation in schools. It was such a, if they were lucky, even if they did want to do anything about it, it would be like once a year they would sit the kids down and do an assembly and say, right, today we're going to talk about online safety. Don't talk to strangers online. Okay, you're good to go. That's it. That was what they were told.
Yeah.
And I just, for me, that didn't sit right. It wasn't my own experience in online spaces. And so, I was just really interested. And then an incredible opportunity came up with the UK Safer Internet Centre. They'd been given funding by the European Commission to set up a helpline to protect children online. And I applied for it really thinking that I wouldn't have a chance, and I got it. And the job was to run a pilot for 12 months and then evaluate it. Well, the helpline is still running now, 15 years later. So we obviously did it. We obviously did pretty well. And it was a real revelation. We set up this helpline. I worked with some incredible mentors from other really significant services in the online safety space and child protection space. And we just didn't know what we were going to get. It was like teachers could call us, police could call us, social workers, foster parents. And it was so new. We were like, maybe nobody's ever going to ring. I don't know. And then suddenly the phone started ringing, and it was, it's been really interesting. We were very much ahead of the curve before things would become mainstream. So at the time, it was when kids were first really getting their mobile phones. Mm-hmm. And, so playground bullying was being filmed and put on YouTube.
Okay.
Those sorts of things were happening. Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, kids weren't really using much social media, and then suddenly, boom, they were all on social media.
Exponentially growth, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the time it was Facebook. Adults were using sort of Twitter. It was much smaller then, but it was Facebook. But of course, YouTube was really, really popular right from the offset. MySpace. We still were there when MySpace was a thing, and there was a lot of, it was not the platform's fault, but kids being kids. They'd be mean. Any platform, which is still an issue today, where you had the ability to downvote something that somebody liked. So somebody said, hey, this is what I'm listening to right now. And then other people would just go on and take the mickey. And that can just really blow up into quite a big issue. And of course, then the schools, it would be spilling out into the real world, and they'd be fighting in the playground, and the schools would be phoning us saying, we don't really understand what's happened. Can you help us? So it was a real pleasure. I was with them for nearly 10 years. We set up 3 really successful helplines, one of which was also intimate image abuse, which was such a new topic at the time, predominantly women who were victims, but, having their intimate images shared all over the internet. And so worked with governments to make laws, which didn't exist before, which was quite shocking. Some really proud moments there. And I was on the advisory board of some of the big tech companies. So I was on Safety Council at Twitter when that first started. I was on Snap's advisory board. I did a lot of work with Facebook, particularly about violence against women and girls online. And then later I was invited to join Roblox's advisory board. And that was my journey into working with them in a more formal way. So my relationship with them actually goes back a bit more than the 5 years I've been there.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So it's definitely like, it's been a long path for you to end up at Roblox, but I'm guessing now you can, ally both passions and vocation for gaming and, your willingness to help others.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'd worked in NGOs, that's what I did, it was the safeguarding side of things. And it was really lovely to see tech companies, commercial businesses who really took this stuff seriously. I wasn't hired to be like the poster girl of safety. They really wanted to hear from me what the issues were, what I was seeing on the outside world. And it's been a real joy to, as you say, bring all of that experience and all my passion together to help inform not just Roblox, but the broader video game industry as well. And I absolutely love what I do. I'm very lucky.
Awesome. That's awesome. I wanted to now talk to you about this experience in the gaming industry, because you've already said that you started prior to these 5 years formal in Roblox. So, what was the state of the art regarding this topic when you first started in Roblox?
Yeah, interesting. So it seems ridiculous now, but it was really what we see as table stakes. Like
Okay.
lots of platforms still didn't even have parental controls. They would have report, but it was quite often hidden and quite hard to
Mm.
find. Mute and block maybe if they were lucky, but it really was the most basic things. Every platform legally had to have some kind of policies. The amount of times that you would go onto a platform and it had just been cut and pasted off a different platform, and half the time they wouldn't have even gone through and reread it to make sure that it had the right company name in it. It was really that basic, even that's recent ago. So there were some really good players and some not so good players, and I think part of it is, the games industry particularly is huge. It has grown so much and people have learned so much. I think going back, if we think about 5 years ago, you had these huge companies who had many brands under them, and they kind of called the shots. So they had the money, they were able to invest in the safety tech, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, you had these little tiny indie startup type studios that might have 5 or 6 people working there. They were really well intentioned and they would create these brilliant games that people wanted to be in. They themselves would then grow a community around that. They would have their forums and they'd go and hang out on other chat apps and talk about the experience. But they didn't have the bandwidth, the experience, the resources, the money, or maybe even the knowledge of how to write the policies, how to write the community standards, how to put the moderation in place. And so that's unfortunately, I think, where not just in the games industry, but, this kind of move fast movement, lots of things went wrong through that. I think it's great to be innovative and try new things, but being much more measured. We most of us are familiar with this idea of safety by design. And there's a reason for that. Is actually, it's really hard once you've started something and people are using it to suddenly go, oh, whoa, actually, we don't like it when you behave like this or when you talk like that on the platform. Can we wind it back a bit? Because you've already kind of set the standard for them. So, as I say, things have changed dramatically and they continue to. And it's exciting times to be in the industry.
Would you say there is a difference now, between when you first started and nowadays in terms of, children protection by design in those platforms and games? Because I'm guessing for Roblox or other platforms in the past, they were focused mainly on building cool experience for everybody. And so I'm guessing it's not the first thing that you think of, the downside of building a platform like this and how people would use it. Do you think now it's something different now? Do you think that they are thinking much more at the very beginning of building something about the potential risks of building something like that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting one. So I can speak specifically about Roblox. Our history is quite interesting. Roblox was originally designed as a classroom tool to do physics experiments. It was very ring-fenced. It was a way of doing things that you couldn't do in a real classroom setting, like what happens if you drop a car off the Empire State Building? For example, you wouldn't be able to do that. But actually, you're teaching about velocity and speed and all of those sorts of things. What was really interesting is what the kids were using the tools for to create for themselves. And that really is the essence of where Roblox came from, is giving young people or giving people the tools to be able to create whatever is in their imagination. Roblox is a completely UGC platform, but it was created for children and young people and to be a safe place to experiment. And so we really were right at the forefront of this, not in a preachy way, but it was just built that way. It was built as a thing that could then, over time, we've gradually relaxed a little bit on some of the restrictions because it was very much a ring-fence thing. In terms of moving forward, I mean, there's been great strides in safety tech, in the tools that are available, having better conversations. There's been a lot of innovations that have happened that have then been put out open source, which has enabled those smaller studios and smaller platforms to be able to use them, which is just wonderful because it might have been impossible for them before. What I would say the biggest driver, and it's very timely, we've just had quite recently the announcement that the Online Safety Act has just come into effect here in the UK. Self-regulation has been around for a long time, but it hasn't really made a huge difference. But regulation, whether people like it or not, has definitely driven people to have to implement some more safety tools. There were a lot of companies who were already doing it willingly and were innovating in that space. But the platforms who weren't so interested or, it was really kind of unimportant to them, it has been forced to be front of mind now, and they're having to. It's amazing what happens when you're told you have to do something.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, I think people are more aware of it, whether they wish to be or not.
Yeah, I'm guessing they don't have much choice now because of all the initiatives that are into place. And do you think, by the way, that act, now that UK has one, other countries will follow? What would you say is the most advanced country on that topic right now?
I'm sure the UK would like to say it's the UK,
yeah.
but actually,
I was about to say maybe it's the UK.
I mean, the tagline for this is to be the safest country on the planet online. Okay. So we have very quickly seen the US make their own versions. Some of the regulations that are happening here. So there was the California Children's Code, which was an offshoot from the Age Appropriate Design Code. We're seeing work happening around something similar to the Online Safety Act, but there's lots of other things. So Europe has been working on the Digital Services Act, which is more about, how we market to people, advertising, sales, all of those things, fairness, monopolies, fairness of companies. There's lots of work happening in Australia, which has always really been at the forefront. They have an e-safety commissioner. They're one of the only countries in the world that has somebody with that title and that responsibility. New Zealand, very similarly, online harms bill they have. Brazil is really hot on this stuff. Germany's really hot on, particularly around children and their online experience. So there are lots of slightly different variations, but collectively they're all gaining momentum. And if you're a platform like mine, which is global, you have to adhere to all of them.
Yeah. Well, it's very nice to see some changes, happening at nation, government level.
Yeah, I was thinking now about more on the game developers level. What as the industry they've been doing. I'm thinking about the very first that I remember protection to harmful content that children had in video games. That was like the age rating system, where if I was under 18, I couldn't play maybe Call of Duty because it will have harmful content for children. But nowadays it falls short, right? This only to be the only protection that children have.
So I think they're really important. For some countries, it is a legal requirement. So the age ratings to buy a physical game, not that people quite often do.
Exactly.
We don't really have Blockbusters anymore to go and buy your physical discs. Yeah. But that was part of what the age ratings were for, is to deter sales to underage people. With the advent of digital download, I guess that has become a bit defunct, but where it has been helpful is particularly for parents and grandparents and caregivers and others. But it is quite subjective and
easy to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's advisory rather than a specific rule now.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the public have often been confused about why certain things have certain age ratings, because there's in social media and other platforms, there's something called COPA, which is the Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act, which basically stops you from advertising to under 13s or storing their data. So people assumed that it meant that anything that was for over 13s, that was based on, the ability of the person to use the platform. And it's not. It's a very different thing. And actually, some of the, for example, ESRB or the PEGI ratings or IARC ratings that are applied around the world, at least what they do is break it down into here's violent content, here's swearing, here's depiction of gambling, here's sexual content, whatever. But actually, it's all quite a blur between what is suitable for everybody. I think until you get to the really mature 18 plus, and even then people don't necessarily always understand why something is rated an 18 plus compared to a 16 or a 15. So yeah, I think it's a little bit outdated, but it is still necessary.
Yeah, that's true. When do you think that the click happened for the industry to adopt other methods besides this one?
So at Roblox, we have introduced our own system, and I know that some other platforms have something similar, which they've been working on. I think some are rolling out soon. So we have something called experience guidelines. It's still a work in progress. One of the things at Roblox is we're always iterating. We're not a one and done company. It's like we bring something out and we're just testing and getting feedback from the community, from the developers. Where can we keep improving on these things? But ours is a little bit more granular. We put it in the hands of the developer community. So all of our top experiences have to fill in a questionnaire. It's really quite thorough, but they're all used to it now. So they're okay. They're happy to do it. And it literally goes into on scale, how much violent content has your game got, how much blood content, whether it's like really cartoony, whether it's realistic, and it just breaks down all of these different things. We have launched 17 plus experiences on Roblox. Okay. People were really shocked by that because I think there's still a reputation for Roblox that it's a kids game, whereas that's far from the truth. Actually, over half the people on Roblox are over 13. And our fastest growing demographic, and has been for a couple of years now, is 17 to 24. And that's it is really.
I was among those thinking it was mainly for children also. So yeah.
It is. We have a community. I think a lot of them played Roblox when they were kids, and now they've come back to create on Roblox. Okay. But now what they're doing is creating experiences for people like them. So we have some of the examples we have on there. They literally look like AAA game, first-person shooters. You would not know whether it had come from one of these huge studios, and it hasn't. It's been created by the Roblox community, and they are incredible. And also, by having a 17 plus rating, it enables them to be much more creative, much more free to create experiences that they and their friends would go and play somewhere else, but they can stay within that Roblox environment that they love. That's where their community is. That's where their friends are. They want to go off and still play some of the silly games and have bed wars or do whatever, but they can also go and be in a bar or, those sorts of things as well. So I think for us, we've adapted with the community. We haven't taken the community that way. We've just listened to what they wanted and we're growing up with them. But with that does come that responsibility that to enable that older community to have the fun that they want, to have the freedom they want, and to create the experiences that's right for them, we still have to provide that safer, more ring-fenced place for a 10-year-old. So our 17 plus is actually age ID verified. We're quite tight on that.
Okay, so this is where you would have like some kind of KYC in place to verify age for these kinds of games? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah. So as I say, it's proper ID verified, and we use similar systems to those used by the banks. It's really quite tight. Yeah. For 13 plus, we have something called trusted users. So it's mobile verified. We use a couple of other tools, which I can't share because obviously that's a bit confidential. And then it's about them as a user. We're trying to prevent bad actors from being able to come back on the platform easily. So it is a kind of way of getting a feel for who that user is, and to then, okay, they're fine, they're a good person on the platform, therefore they can access this level of different access to things like voice chat or whatever, and always building out those tools. We have certain experiences that are just absolutely appropriate for all ages. You know, it's very light-hearted. There's very minimal kind of gore or violence or anything like that, and that's really the starting point. And I think just, you know, when we think about the youngest people coming on the platform, that is where our call to action really is to their parents and their families, their caregivers, is if you want your kids to come on Roblox, you do have to understand that we are a platform for all ages. We're not made for little children. And so whilst there's a lot of content on there that's totally suitable for them, you know, there is a little bit of work you need to do right at the beginning to set them up so that they're seeing the stuff that's right for their age group.
Okay.
It makes total sense that, you know, I mean, the solution is not only on Roblox and the platform side, but also on the parents and the caregivers side to understand what kind of platforms they are bringing their kids onto, essentially. Do you think like education related to this and pedagogy, you know, goes a long way into solving also part of these issues, or do you think it's mainly on Roblox and the different platforms to try and make the mindsets evolved?
Well, I hope that education's important because it's about 50% of my job. So, so, I mean, as I said, you know, the old days where schools would say, oh, yeah, we do online safety. And it would be like, we showed the kids a really scary video about grooming.
Yeah.
You know, that talks about one thing and it doesn't actually give them any advice. It doesn't help them. It just scares them. And most of the time, and I know this from working with kids for years, they find it funny. You know, it's got
like
that bad.
Yeah.
It's just like, that wouldn't happen to me. It's stupid. It's nothing that resonates with them. So that, thankfully, we're moving a bit away from that now. I'm also hearing, it's really interesting. We've done a few research projects recently and working with partners. Kids, like, they go to school to learn, they're happy to learn, but they're a bit like, I really don't want my teachers talking to me about my gaming because that's what I do in my life, in my time. And what do they know about it anyway? And I think that's also a fair point. What we've heard, again, really recently, there's some new research coming out from some of our partners very soon. And actually, there's been a real tide turn where kids are saying, you know what, I do actually talk to my parents. And I do trust that they know more than I thought they knew about online spaces. And maybe that's because the parents now are those digital natives who are growing up and having the kids.
Exactly.
That generational gap is closing. Actually, for us to equip the parents, yes, of course, it's important that schools talk about this and they do have some responsibility. But actually, the key bit, I think, at the moment is for us to support the parents to be confident having a conversation. The most awkward thing you can do is just sit down and go, right, we're going to have a conversation about your online life. You know, it shouldn't be like that. It should just be as casual as, oh yeah, who are you playing with? Like you would if your kid was going out to go outside to play with somebody. You know, it's just general interest. You're not prying. It should be a casual conversation, but you're leaving that door open. If something goes wrong and your kid does want to go, something weird just happened, or I got scammed, or, you know, I'm having a really hard time with this person, you know, you just need to leave that door open. I think for a long time, parents thought they had to know about every platform, every game, inside and out. They don't. The message is still the same. It's still just parenting, really. So trying not to be scared about that. And so for us, it's both internal and external. Like we have to create the tools. We have to moderate the platform appropriately. We have to prevent toxicity, harassment, bad behavior on the platform. In-game education is the one that we really, you know, that's the sweet spot. You don't want it to be something that interrupts people's user experience, that interrupts the flow. This is not about putting interstitials everywhere because people hate that. But there are key moments, whether it's a loading screen, whether it's when they're making a purchase, you know, those little reminders of, have you thought about this? Are you sure you know this person? You know, they kind of do work. They back up that messaging. And then, as I say, helping build both the resilient people in the platform who can recognize when something's not right, and then empowering the parents, the families, the people around them, so that if I came to my parent and said, there's this person, I think they're being a bit weird. They keep asking me funny questions. I don't know what to do. So I don't totally panic and go, oh my God, I'm going to phone the police. You know, it's about how I then respond to that and feeling confident and going, hey, let's sit down, show me the sorts of messages you're getting. You know, when did this start? Is anyone else involved in the conversation? Just those sorts of things. And to really empower and build resilience, I think, is everybody's responsibility. NGOs have an important part to play in this, and they're really underfunded as well. But there's some great crosswork that can happen. As I say, kind of interagency, across platforms, government involvement. There's a real drive where some key points we can talk.
I will say an idea of mine that I'm having right now. So if we can go back to the beginning of Roblox that would be used to teach physics in classrooms, maybe we can also use Roblox in classrooms to teach about these things. I don't know.
Yeah, we're having those conversations right now. What a surprise.
Oh, nice.
I mean, so there is something I would be really frank about, is it can be done really well and it can be done really badly.
Oh, okay.
I have seen, not necessarily on my platform, but very well-intentioned, let's gamify something serious. And sometimes it can be really cringy. It's like the topic that you're talking about is really serious and you can't actually make it fun. So I think it has to be the right thing. We did actually have a really good experience in South Korea. Here's an example. We did a partnership a few years ago with GS25, which is the biggest chain of convenience stores in South Korea. And it's really popular with teenagers. It's like the place they hang out after school. They go get some food and they all hang around and play, chat together. And so they wanted to create a Roblox experience, and they built a whole Civility area, and it's like a training ground, and it's a full-on obstacle course type experience, and it's all about misinformation and disinformation, and they just kind of go through, they pick up the clues, they answer the questions, but they earn rewards for doing it. It was so popular. Like, I was really surprised. We helped a bit with some of the content for that, some of the questions. It had millions of plays in like 2 weeks, and we were really surprised, but it was because it was a cool hangout. It was a brand that the teenagers really were invested in and they trusted. So it didn't feel that patronizing thing. It was just, we hit it just right. And then, for them to be able to get like a bowl of udon noodles as a reward, they were like, yeah, that's what I want to do this for. So use noodles, it works.
Okay, that's a good message.
This must be one of the main difficulties when you're trying to educate a younger audience. You have to, kind of be cool and be where they're expecting you to be, or otherwise, as you said, you can have a very different and maybe opposite result.
Yes, I think that's the case. Is think about who you're trying to talk to. So if we were trying to get the policymakers to be on board with something, even parents, to go and do a really silly obstacle course type experience and give them some noodles as a reward probably wouldn't work for them. But for the teenagers, it was brilliant. And we were really proud of the way it was received. Awesome. We do actually have a Roblox experience for teachers. Now, here's another example of how it can work. So the teachers do this before they teach about Roblox or Roblox Studio in their classes. And it really is like a 101. It's like, here's how you move your avatar. It really goes back to basics, because we just assume it's very easy to say, hey, parents, go play Roblox with your kids. But if they're not a gamer, to pick it up for the first time, they're like, I don't even know how to walk. I don't know how to move my character. I don't know how to pick something up or equip. So we've literally done that kind of level of, here's what your avatar can do. Here's how the controls. Here's then how you find the report functions, the leaderboards, the who a person is, all of those sorts of things. Because we were listening to them and they were saying, I don't know how to teach this because I don't understand it. So trying to pitch whatever that message is, that learning, that education, get it right. Listen to the community, find out what they need to know, and don't make those assumptions that everyone's starting at the same point, because they're definitely not. And I think when it comes to particularly kids and teens, like I've worked in safeguarding, as we said, for many, many years. There are certain assumptions I'm happy to make to safeguard any human, actually, because it's not just about kids. There are certain things that we all need to thrive, and there are certain risk patterns that I would pick up and say, oh, that's really not good. But the world has changed. I'm an old lady now, and even having a teenage son who shares everything with me, I'm very lucky, but it's terrifying. Their world is so different than ours, and they're living it out in online spaces, the pressures of social media, all those things that everyone knows about. There is a lot of risk and harm out there, and it's not always the obvious things that we think it is. So sometimes, when people talk about cyberbullying, okay, well, that's a really big thing, isn't it? The first thing that any young person I speak to says is, can you stop saying the word cyber, because it means nothing to them at all. It is just bullying.
So
we're talking. So that's one thing. Is
already. So why make the distinction?
It's
exactly.
just get the language right, and then it will resonate better. Let's talk about bullying. What does that look like for you? But actually, also, we make assumptions that it's like they want us to go charging in and fix it, and parents need to know everything. It's like, no, sometimes kids just want to tell you that something's happening. Mm-hmm. They want you to support them to deal with it. They don't want you to go wading in and I'm going to fix this for you. That's not always the right solution. And it actually kind of takes away some of their resilience and their skills as well. Some of these things are a part of life. Now, of course, we don't want anybody to be harmed. We don't want people to have really bad experiences. But for most people, it's really low-level things. It is being scammed because you made a mistake and trusted the wrong person. So maybe sometimes it's a bit like, okay, I learned my lesson from that. It's not the end of the world. What am I going to know next time? What would I recognize? How would I deal with it differently? So there's so much work we can do. We just have to keep trying different methods of getting those messages across.
Awesome.
As you said, the topic is very serious, and sometimes some of the offenses that you are, looking into can be, very, very serious, but and critical. Can you give us, like, not necessarily examples, but like what would I be facing as a kid if I join Roblox tomorrow? What kind of risk the parents are taking for letting the kids play on those platforms?
So I would say, thankfully, any of those really serious things are incredibly rare on Roblox.
Yeah.
We have been criticised for being overly cautious in things like our filtering and moderation. We have been able to grow that and develop it to become much more granular. It's much more context-based now. So whereas before, kids couldn't share any personal information, but that also meant they couldn't share any numbers in case it was their telephone number. We've come over those things now, so it's very obvious what's a PII or what is actually hey, I won 3 fish in this game, So we've got much better at that. I think any risk in an online space, it just echoes what happens in the real world. Mm-hmm. There will be bad actors who go out of their way to target young people. Now, we have lots of systems in place, lots of technical tools, and lots of very good, skilled people whose job it is to prevent them coming on the platform, or if they are on the platform, to get them off it as quickly as possible. We proactively work with organisations like NECMEC, law enforcement, and others. If there's suspicion of, for example, a grooming incident or something like that, we have software and tools which pick up signals of really bad and concerning behaviours. But they are going to come into contact with people who are mean. They are going to come into contact with people who want to scam them. Yep. Occasionally, we have very coordinated groups, and it's a tiny minority of people who aren't really on our platform. They coordinate on other places, but it's funny for them to come in and do something really naughty, really disruptive. They know our systems will pick up their content and it will be banned within minutes. But in that time, they've had their bit of fun. have probably recorded it, and then it will appear elsewhere. We have no tolerance for that, but we can't necessarily always prevent it in that first instance. We're always looking for solutions of how we do that, including going where they are quite often to just try to be ahead of the game and find out what they're planning. But thankfully, most of those things, as I say, they're not significantly harmful. It might be a little bit upsetting at the time if somebody was mean to you, or they steal your neon dragon that you wanted, and, or even just falling out with your friends. That's a reality. That's what happens in all online spaces, particularly for young people. When you're having your conversations with young people, again, it's just keeping that open conversation. Make sure that they're aware of things like if somebody tries to take them off Roblox, we can't protect them. We can't protect them when they go onto another platform, but our tools can protect them when they're on our platform. So if somebody says, hey, come and chat with me on this app, that should be a big red flag. They should be coming to tell a responsible adult and getting help, and hopefully flag it to us too, because we want to know about that person. We want to get them off our platform and report them to law enforcement, for example. So just helping, again, repeating those messages. But it's no different than if a stranger came to you in the park and said, come for a walk with me. You should be saying no. So I wouldn't say we have unique risks, but they are the same real life risks that happen everywhere. And we have to be honest, there's no platform in the world that is going to be 100% safe. There just isn't.
Yeah. Laura, I wanted to ask you this, if it's too personal, please feel free to not respond. But how does this everyday work of you impact you directly? Because sure is a difficult topic to handle, so it must be hard as well for you to deal with all of these every day, or no?
So that's a really great question. And I know it is something that rightfully we're talking about, like the welfare of moderators and people who work in trust and safety. I'm quite lucky in the role that I have now. As I say, first off, it's incredibly rare that anything like that happens on Roblox. Yeah. So we're not working with the worst of the worst. I went to speak at a conference a couple of months ago. As I say, I was there as a speaker, but I just realized, I haven't been on that front line, running the helplines, listening to victims of really serious crimes online. And so I said, right, I'm going to immerse myself in this learning. I want to hear from the police. I want to hear from the social workers, and I want to hear from the victims who were there. And I pretty much cried for a couple of hours. And I was like, it was such a reality check of, I've actually got it quite nice in the role that I'm in now. And mostly what I do is positive, because we're kind of trying to challenge these negative things. I'm trying to prevent it, as opposed to dealing with people who have experienced it recently. It really gave me the fire in my belly to go back and say, we can still do more. We can still have more tools. We can still be faster. We can have more people. We can write this resource, So it kind of has the opposite effect, thankfully, right now.
Yeah, you can also use it as fuel. So,
that's it. Yeah. That's exactly it. It was just like, I feel invigorated again, hearing that poor girl who had been through that experience over there. I want to go even harder to prevent that on my platform, where I can do some good. But we do have a responsibility collectively to make sure that the people doing these jobs are well supported, well paid. It's a reality. We need to pay them well. It's a really difficult job. They need, if they're not mentally resilient themselves, how can they possibly be responsible for protecting other people, to recognize those flags? Training is really important. Having those good policies in the first place, because it's the policies that we use to then turn into literally the guidance for the moderators. So making sure that if they're faced with an issue, they know what to do with it, and so they don't feel responsible if they do sort of drop the ball and something happens. So it is a huge issue. Interestingly, it is one that's covered by some of those regulations we were talking about earlier. So I think the Digital Services Act definitely has a focus on well-being and supervision of moderators and people working in trust and safety. So one to watch. So great question.
Thank you for the answer. Yeah, it's because yeah, we're asking that also because we know some people building, stuff on toxicity management, for instance. We have one of them. It's a project from France called SafeBear, and the idea is to, put more education towards parents so that they know and they are aware the kind of games their kids play and what kind of risks they could face, and also take legal action if something happens. And they were just telling us like the stuff they see on a daily basis using the AI, look at the messages, look at the kind of conversation they see, and it can be very depressing and impacting in a very negative way. So happy to see that you can also use that as fuel, because it can also help you do a better job. And yeah.
I think so, but I think that only works if you feel that you can make a difference. I think if you were in a platform where you weren't listened to, I'm sure that they are still there, which is quite frustrating. Or for some people, it is just time to take a break. It is. Yeah. You have to recognize your own signals as well. But fighting the good fight. People do this job for a reason. We're all here because we really want to make a difference. We're not here for the pay. Let's put it that way. So let's keep doing it.
Of course. And actually, it's a great transition to our next question, which is if like you had any means at your disposal, what would you need to definitely get rid of the issues children face when they connect to a game?
Ooh, good questions. Okay, so it's an interesting one, because part of me is like, well, let's just lock it all down, everything on by default, loads of tools. But I work with young people, I talk to them all the time. That's not what they want. And if we did that on our platform, they'd go somewhere else because it's not fun. Yeah. They still want to have fun. So I actually think it does come back to still, it's what we do, but we just need to do it more and keep improving and keep adding things. So things that prevent bad actors being able to come on platforms, picking up those signals quicker, getting them off, making it a really hostile environment for people who want to do harm, so that it's just not worth it for them. That's the technology side. That's what we need to be building out. And then on the other side, as I say, continuing to build this resilience, kids who can really manage themselves and others and keep the community around them healthy and positive. It's okay to be cheeky. It's okay to mess about in games. You don't have to behave yourself 100% of the time, but just stamping out that really negative behavior, I think is the key thing. So yeah, more investment into the tools, preventative measures, and more education on the other side.
I think you put your finger on one of the issues, which at some point you said, like, some of the educators, they're underpaid, and maybe that's also some of the solution, more investments towards the people who are doing, as you said, on the front line. So you think that would also be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be, the investments, I know this is the problem, is like, well, do you want me to invest over here or do you want me to invest over there? But actually the reality is we have to invest everywhere. Most companies, the natural thing is to invest in growth, to invest in new engineering tools. Yeah. And of course, we still have to have that. If your platform's going, is failing every 5 minutes, then, you've lost your business anyway. But I think something that has happened over the last few years is this starting to understand that having a safe platform is a positive return on investment. You are not wasting money by doing that. You are actually building experiences and platforms where people want to be. You will have better retention. You will have more growth. You'll have a good brand reputation. You won't be getting grief from the policymakers and politicians. So it's a win-win to have this good, safe, healthy environment for people to come to in the first place. So why not invest in it, whether that's people or tools?
Well, we definitely wish more, games, had a similar mindset, because sometimes you feel like it's the opposite, as you said, like sometimes they seem, content of the kind of money they are making with the kind of issues they're having on the platform, and it feels like they don't see the reason why they should invest and, stop this, or and as you said, we believe the exact same way, doing fraud detection and stuff on games, which is that the more healthy your community is, the more it can last.
Yeah, and the game will thrive better. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Laura, is there any other good initiatives out there regarding this topic that you would like to highlight?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So in my introduction, you talked a little bit about the Fair Play Alliance.
Yep.
So there is a fantastic framework that some of my colleagues created that was worked on a few years ago, which is about, it's a framework for tackling disruptive behaviors on platforms. It's really, really helpful tool. If you visit the Fair Play Alliance website, you can access the whole toolkit there and everything that you need. It goes through everything from risk assessments, reviewing where you're at, and then suggestions step by step on how you can tackle some of these behaviors. There is a new piece of work that's going on at the moment, which is a digital playbook for thriving. So one part is tackling the toxicity, the negative behaviors, disruptive behaviors. And now we're moving forward going, well, if you deal with that, what happens next? So the obvious next step is thriving. That's people having the best time on these platforms. So yeah, and this is really helpful because the playbook literally is, from a developer point of view, oh, I've got this issue on my platform. These are the people it's affecting. What sorts of things? How do I want to help them? Do I want it to be, in-game experience, or is it going to be an education piece or whatever? And it literally is like a hold your hand step by step how you can work through some of these things. That's absolutely brilliant. We also host some great webinars and podcasts through the Fair Play Alliance, and my dear friends at Anybrain may have been on one of those. So please do check it out. I think it's available on the website. Yeah. That was a great conversation that we had, guys. So yeah, I'd love people to come and tune into that. And then generally, I think there is, we were really proud to host some work earlier this year in partnership with a digital wellness lab. We did a project which I hosted 7 workshops of 2 hours each with the great and good of academia, civil society, regulators, tech companies, safety tech, awesome. Child health experts, to look at, the hypothesis was in 5 to 10 years, we can make online spaces more safe and civil than the real world. What do we have to do to get there? And so we looked at what technology, what policy and what education would be needed to really move the needle in 5 years. So we weren't interested in what people are working on now. The question was, what haven't we tried? What haven't we done? And so that was really interesting. We published a white paper this summer, which is available on the Digital Wellness Lab website. We'll maybe try and share the link somehow. Now it's like, okay, how do we dig down into those findings and really so we kept it really top level. We didn't want it to be prescriptive for platforms, but people want more. So now we're like, okay, so let's take each one of these recommendations and see what that could really look like in your platforms. What I would say overwhelmingly, and this goes back to some of the conversations we've had today, one of the key things that kept coming through this is if you are a platform used by young people, involve young people, whether that be in design of your products, consultations, listening to their day-to-day needs. But yeah, we need to get the youth voice much more involved in this. We're doing things at them and not with them.
Exactly. Thank you, Laura, for such wonderful insight. Yeah. Thank you.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you, guys.
Hope to talk to you soon in another type of way. Since we have done webinars, podcasts, maybe next time we can do a stream of another pressing and urgent topic on our industry.
That would be amazing. Or maybe we can go and stand on a stage and speak together, guys.
Yeah. We'll find a way to organize this. But yes, thank you again so much for participating in that very first recording of the podcast, and thank you so much also for what you're doing for young gamers out there. I was visiting my family, a few days ago, and I was talking about what you're doing at Roblox, and they said, it's reassuring to see that people are, giving us a fighting chance against the impacts of very big innovations that usually they take us by surprise. So it's because
brilliant.
of initiatives like yourself that
I
we
love
can
that.
actually understand a bit better what's happening. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do, guys. It's great talking with you, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, we will certainly.
Will do. Thank you, Laura.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.